It's been long enough, and be patient, hang in there, and someday I'm going to redeem the situation, meaning I'll turn it around some way or another. And usually the outcome is in our favor, or God's favor, which is about one and the same. As with all these stories, though, in the Bible, what's helpful, though, is try to connect these stories, these narratives, to our own experience. For instance, in the story of creation in the Garden of Eden, we had a redemption story. Adam and Eve did something that wasn't appropriate to what God wanted to see done, so they were in exile. That's the fall. You have your Garden of Eden, you have your fall. But there was a promise way down the road that someday I'll redeem you, and the Garden of Eden, you'll get back to this peaceful Garden of Eden. Joseph experienced the same thing. He had a very wealthy, happy life. His brothers kidnapped him and sold him into slavery, but he experienced redemption later on when he became Pharaoh of Egypt. And there you can multiply these stories over and over and over. Jacob was the same way with Esau, and there was some sort of a redemption that took place later with Jacob, and he married whoever it was he married. I can't remember my history that well right now. And this goes on and on. However, with all of these kinds of things, what's helpful to do is try to connect them to our human experience today. How do you do this? How do you make these Bible stories make sense in the 20th and 21st century? How do you do this kind of stuff? Most of the time, all we have to go on is our own personal experiences. For instance, when I was growing up, once in a while, I didn't know what the word shame was. I'd hear it, aren't you ashamed? I have no idea what the heck they were talking about. However, when I was about 4 years old, my mother we were going to the grocery stores, to Jansen's IGA store, and we drove over there. And we went through the aisles and everything, but like every kid, I don't know, I've checked this out with a lot of my brother and my brother's friends and some of my own. We all did the same thing. I don't know if it's unique to boys. But my mom's checking out the groceries, and there's some double bubble gum there, and so ain't nobody paying any attention to me, and I just grabbed one of them things and just took it on home. Of course, when I get there, I'm not sly enough to hide it for a while. I'm playing with it, of course, and my mother notices that. Where'd you get that? Oh, I don't know. I found it, I guess. Well, she knew. Long story short, we go back to Jansen's IGA. I have to walk in. Now, she's not going to go with me. She's going to sit in that Chevrolet, and she's going to wait. And so she waits, and I walk in the Jansen's IGA. Of course, there's another lady, and her kids are there, and I have to get in line, and then I have to show it to Mr. Jansen and apologize. Well, now I learned. And then I get back in the car, and on the way home, aren't you ashamed? Hey, now I know what ashamed feels like. So now I know. Same way with hot and cold or any other kind of linguistic words we have in our vocabulary. We have to tie them to some sort of action or feeling or an experience that we have to make sense out of them. It's not enough to say, hey, have you heard the call of God? I don't know what that means. We used to ask this for the last 25 years when I served on the Conference Board of Ordained Ministry. We had to find out if they knew the call of God or if they had that call. How in the heck do you measure that? It's very subjective in a lot of ways. You could ask them, you could find out if they felt the call of God to be in the Methodist Church, whether they went along to our kinds of doctrines and polity or not. But whether they actually experienced it, that's a difficult question. So you try to figure that out. Same way with hot and cold. Never knew what the word hot meant. I could see things that felt warm, but I didn't know when my mom said when she was ironing clothes when I was about 3 1/2, and she says, don't touch this, it's hot. Well, of course, I got to figure out, well, what is hot? You touch it, I figure out what hot is. So I no longer want to touch anything when someone says hot. Same way in the Scripture. Most of the time when we read the Bible, what we experience in the Scripture can be connected to our ordinary, everyday life. We can find something that helps us understand what it meant to be saved, or what it meant to be redeemed a little bit, or what it meant to hear God's call, or what it meant to be released from some sort of burden. We understand those kinds of words, and we can point to experiences. However, when it comes to redemption, it's a different kind of process. I have noticed that there seems to be a disconnect. Our cultural experience of the word redeem, to be redeemed, to have a redeemer, to experience redemption, seems to be a little bit different than the biblical experience of it. It sometimes feels a little bit schizophrenic. For instance, we all know what the word redeem means. For a long time, and even today, you can go get coupons. You take a coupon, you go in, and you exchange it for something of more value than the coupon was. You get a little discount. You get this in financial markets. You can take assets, hard assets, and you can liquefy them, turn them into cash. We all know what redemption is. Can you redeem this coupon for them? Can you redeem this ticket for 10 minutes on a ride? Can you redeem this contract for... Can you redeem this loan for something else? And we understand this stuff, and we exchange these things over and over, and that's what redeem. Who's the redeemer? Well, in some case, it might be the carnival barker. The redeemer might be the banker. The redeemer might be a broker. The redeemer might be a grocery guy. The redeemer might be, well, I can't think of it. I can go on these kinds of things. Sometimes it gets a little sick in political stuff. A redeemer might be some... nations sometimes look for redeemers, but the redeemer is some human being. Even in the scripture, they kept looking for a redeemer. In the Old Testament, someday God would send us a Messiah. They're still looking for the Messiah if you're of the Jewish faith. A redeemer is someone who will come, and he'll allow you to exchange what troubles you and cleanse you of your will, what ails you. You watch the movie Hoosiers or the movie of that baseball player, The Natural. They get a second chance. The basketball team in Hoosiers are down on their luck. A coach comes in and they experience redemption. They get a second chance. The guy in Natural, he was going to be a pro football player, does really well, then falls, and 16 years later, he gets back in it and makes a success. He experiences redemption. The Bible's different, though. The interesting thing about the Bible is there are a lot of stories where the people don't seem to get a second chance. God seems to make a command, and in this command basically say, this is what I want done. And here's the thing. In human life, if we don't get it done exactly the way the boss wants it done, we go and ask for forgiveness and everything goes all right, but the outcome, and we get a different, the outcome comes, gives us forgiveness, and then but the outcome the boss wants still takes place. Now, what I'm talking about in the Bible, the outcome doesn't take place for the person who fell by the wayside and didn't do what God commands. They don't get this second chance. Adam and Eve didn't get a second chance. They didn't do what God wanted them to do. Boom, they're out. There was no discussion about this. It was just done. Sorry, you're gone. Cain and Abel. Cain didn't get a second chance. Cain killed Abel. Boom, you're banished. There was none of this discussion about her, banished. I tell you what, you get banished for 5 years and then you can come back. Didn't work that way. He was gone. You take Moses. Moses the same way. Moses is asked to deliver the people from the oppression of Pharaoh. He goes forth and then makes one little misstep. And God even teases him. Hey, look at all of that beautiful, green, lush land of milk and honey. You see all of that? Ain't for you, buddy. You're staying right here. Everybody else gets to go, but you can't. Ain't no second chance. Didn't matter how good he was, even after he made his misstep. God says, sorry, bud, no way. Same way with Lot's wife. Everybody leaves, whatever the name of that town was, Sodom and Gomorrah, was told, don't look back. Well, she did. Sorry. That's the way it went. The stories can be enumerated. Saul. Same way. God told Saul, when you attack this place, you kill everything in sight. I don't want anything left. No human life, no animal life. Scorchers, get rid of it all. Saul says, I ain't doing that. Now, I'll destroy the army, but I'm not going to go after everything else. God says, sorry, bud, ain't no kingdom for you. So David gets to bring the northern and southern kingdoms together, not Saul. Same way with Jonah. Jonah makes a misstep, and guess what? He still had to go to Nineveh whether he wanted to or not. He doesn't get to decide this. Even Jesus experiences it. The outcome is his death on the cross, and there's no two ways about it. He doesn't get to decide how this is going to play out. In our ordinary cultural experience, when it comes to redemptions, redeemers, and being redeemed, we understand it because the outcome that we desire is going to happen. And we have a coupon that does this. We have some kind of a token or a symbol, whatever it might be, to experience it. So whatever missteps we take, we ask for forgiveness, life goes on, and we work better to get the outcome. The outcome may be delayed, but the outcome that we desire gets there, or a portion of it. It's not all wasted. We're not just condemned and that's the end of it. But here are some characters in the Old and New Testament where the outcome doesn't happen the way we think it's going to happen. And when you get that kind of disconnect, what does it mean then when the scriptures when we have a redemption story? And what does it mean? How do we know we've been redeemed? And what is it? What does this word mean? Redemption. Maybe the difference is in the nature of it. Too often we think redemption is a temporal event. It kind of reads that way in the scripture. Adam and Eve get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. God eventually said, I will redeem this situation. Well, it went on for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and finally, Israel, the northern and southern kingdoms, were created, and Israel had a kingdom under the reign of David and under the reign of Solomon. It eventually broke apart and disappeared. But it occurred. But in the lives of the people that lived through all of those thousands upon thousands of years, redemption hadn't happened yet. Even in Isaiah, what Isaiah is writing about, is the time of the Babylonian Empire. Most of the wealth and all of the artisans and skillful workers in the Jewish area were taken as slaves, and they lived in Babylon. They take the educated, the elites, if you will, people who knew how to get things done, knew how to do things. All that was left was the poor in Judah and Israel, which no longer exists. Most of that was controlled by the Assyrians and some of the other tribes that were jockeying for power at that time. So in their time, redemption didn't happen. It was years during that Jewish diaspora, that exilic period. It took all the way to 1948 before they actually had their land back. So in the scripture, we get these long periods. So what we can tell is that the experience of redemption is not a temporal event, and it doesn't necessarily happen to me. But does that mean, how do I go about experiencing that, though? If it's not going to happen to me, should I do what the old Schlitz commercials said back in the 70s? You only go around once in life, you should grab all the gusto you do. Is that the way we should live? So what's a more appropriate way to live to understand? Well, God's redemptive activity isn't something that happens like a knife coming out, going through a hot knife through butter, or something that the skies open up and bang, here it is. God's redemptive process works very, 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 very slow and subtle. Ever see a kaleidoscope? Most of us remember the kaleidoscope. You set it up there and you turn it. And when you're turning it, all those flakes or whatever they're made out of, they just fall all over the place. They don't make any kind of, it's all just chaotic. There's no structure or form to it. You keep turning, all of a sudden, boom, a pattern emerges. And you might turn a little bit more, the pattern stays there. You turn a little bit more and the pattern starts to fall apart again. If you try to back up, you can't get the pattern back. God's redemptive process works a lot like that. If we want to tie it to our everyday living, what is going on here is we need to ask the question of what is being redeemed in redemption. And what's being redeemed in redemption is the redemptive process itself. God's redemptive process is being redeemed. That's why when he goes to these guys and he starts calling them, he goes to Peter or Simon and his brother Andrew. Now, in real life, if someone comes to us and says, hey, why don't you drop everything and quit your career and follow me? Follow you where? Well, I ain't going to tell you. I'll just make you fisher of men, fishers of people. What does that mean? Well, it doesn't say. This little story doesn't say. Jesus just goes to these people. We don't know how many people he went to before he even went to these. All that's in the scripture are not the thousands or hundreds he may have asked. We only know of the 12 he did. He doesn't tell them anything about the goal. He doesn't tell them anything about how long it's going to take. He doesn't tell them anything about the mission involved or what their role is going to be. He just goes and calls them and says, hey, follow me and I'll make you fishers of people. If God's redemptive, if it was a temporal event, we would get all the answers when our boss says, hey, if somebody is looking for us to change jobs and they come after us and they says, I'd like to hire you, we sit down and we figure out what it is they want us to do. We get this all written out, nice and neat. We know what they want to do, what the mission is, the goal is. Jesus doesn't do any of this stuff. He doesn't make it look like he's running a campaign of anything. He just goes and finds out, hey, follow me. He does the same way. Which of us who was taking care of our parents would just drop it and leave? James and John, the sons of Zebedee, leave their dad all by himself mending the nets. Hey, sorry, Dad, we're taking this guy. Where's he going? I don't know. Are you going to get paid? I don't know. What's the goal of this thing? What are you supposed to be doing? We didn't know. He didn't say anything. He just wants us to follow him. Are you kidding me? It sounds like this little nursery story I read about the Pied Piper. You just take off and go. It's a disconnect. Redemption has a lot. That's what real redemption is. We know we're participating in a redemptive process and that our goal is to help God redeem his own redemptive ways. We participate in that when we are brought to a decision point where the door opens, but we have no idea where it's headed, when that happens, we may be in the midst of a redemptive process. Because like the kaleidoscope, all the roles are getting mixed up. Everything is, we use metaphors like it's chaotic, or I can't find my way, I can't feel the current, I don't know which direction, I feel cast adrift. But all of that's not really a lack of order. It just means I'm involved in something where I do not know its outcome, but I do not need to fear it, because what is being redeemed is not me. What is being redeemed, I don't need to look for a particular point and call that point or a person a redeemer. Jesus Christ, we call him a redeemer, but what he means is he's the one who was willing to accept the openness of God's redemptive process and was willing to participate in the redemption of God's redemptive process. Jesus had no idea when he went to the cross what was going to happen next. He had no idea when he went and got these guys what was going to happen next. And that's important to remember. Just like us, it's not a temporal event. We're not going to find it in the past. It isn't around in the present, and it isn't in the future. There's no design to this. It's not a program. It's not a project. We cannot design this. We can't say, I'm going to be a redemptive person, and here's how I'm going to do this. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to be a redemptive organization. This is how I'm going to do this. There's no bureaucracy that can work this way out. God's redemptive process is like this kaleidoscopic experience of life. We're involved in it. We're called to continue being involved in this redemptive process. What is redeemed is redemption itself. Amen.
And if you will stand.